7 days into this year, we find ourselves in the aftermath of a day when a multitude of Trump supporters, with the aid of the D.C. police, infiltrated the United States Capitol in a failed attempt to stop the electoral vote certification of President-elect Joe Biden. This most embarrassing attempt at subverting our financially influenced democratic process was met with the scorn of liberals and progressives alike. The terms terrorism, white privilege, and Nazi coup were thrown around in describing the riot that happened at the United States Capitol. 70 were arrested, and 4 were killed in the chaos that occurred. As I see it, this was a misguided attempt at resisting a perceived oligarchy at the behest of a con artist president who claims to fight the oligarchy despite the fact that he is of the oligarchy. While mainstream news networks and pundits paint a picture of this being an isolated episode in and of itself, relegated to racist, sexist, bigoted Caucasian Trump supporters, I see what happened yesterday as part of an arc of overall disillusionment with the political and financial system, both left and right, that was 50, not 4, years in the making, which came to a head last year and will continue to escalate in the oncoming year in the form of more riots, more protests, and more unrest. The crisis is not Donald Trump. The crisis is neoliberalism, and I will say it again. The crisis is not Donald Trump. The crisis is neoliberalism. In the wake of the Second World War, the United States was an industrial economic superpower. Our cities were centers of manufacturing and heavy industry, and for a sweet moment in time, almost every adult had a job. Homelessness was a distant memory from the Depression era. Public infrastructure was paid for and maintained with taxes. College was affordable, and one could live on a single job that paid minimum wage. Today, that is not so. The first to feel the wrath of the economic restructuring were BIPOCs, that stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color, in the form of urban renewal. Urban factories were closed. Second and third generation Americans of Irish, Italian, and Eastern European descent were integrated into the spheres of the Anglo-petite bourgeois, stoked by fears of racial anxiety, promulgated by the real estate industry. They packed up and left their urban neighborhoods for greener pastures. This phenomenon was called white flight. Following that was mass unemployment, austerity via a depleted tax base, crumbling infrastructure, decay, and crime. The response? Brutal police crackdowns, for-profit prisons, and the systemic dismantling of entire semi-functional neighborhoods to be replaced with highways, centers of finance and commerce, and inadequate public housing. For 2 decades, this was the reality in our cities. Meanwhile, everything was hunky-dory fine in the suburbs and rural areas where most Caucasian Americans lived, right? Yes, but not exactly. After the Berlin Wall fell down, factories and industrial centers within the city outskirts would soon be outsourced overseas via the policy of free trade agreements like NAFTA, and many jobs were lost and were replaced with technical white-collar positions, doctors, lawyers, corporate professionals of the sort that required collegiate education, or there was military and policing. Mom and pop stores were shut down and replaced with Walmart and Target, with cheaper goods that made overseas, sold for consumption, and low-wage jobs. Economic opportunity was becoming far more scarce in this brave new world of finance capitalism. And what do you know? Urban renewal happening in the city was making way for this new paradigm of professional corporate America. Parents broke the bank to send their suburban kids off to college. Kids themselves also broke the bank to do the such, racking up trillions in student debt in the process, and then those kids would move back to the cities to gain access to these professional class jobs. Landlords and realtors would hike up rents, and in the process price out the pre-existing BIPOC communities that were hanging on by a thread after surviving the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s with little to no help from the state. Mass homelessness would ensue, followed by mass police repression of BIPOC individuals, followed by this rush of gentrification. As this was all happening, fiscal policies were drawn up, siphoning tax revenues for the public benefit to benefit corporate interests instead. Public institutions, schools, garbage collection, hospitals, and infrastructure were shut down and or sold to the highest private bidder, where they could name their own prices. Public unions were decimated, and then tax cuts for the upper petite bourgeois and bourgeois were put into effect with the intent that there would be more private investment in the market and entrepreneurship. This was to be the new economic order of the 21st century, and this was politically a bipartisan effort. At the start of the Bush 43 administration, 9/11 happened and was used as a pretext for the United States to invade and occupy the Middle East in the name of a war on terror, but with the intent to extract and monopolize petroleum in the region. $6 trillion were borrowed, and the public was expected to foot the bill, combined with inflated costs of mass security and surveillance of the American population. In 2008, the housing market popped as suburbanites were trying to sell off their properties to buyers who could not afford the predatory loans that they were allocated. The economy went kerplunk. Barack Obama was elected to restructure these economic calamities and put an end to the war. He did not restructure them. He bailed out the banks, passed a health care law which benefited private insurance companies, and he expanded the war on terror into Libya and Syria. That is a cold, hard fact. Meanwhile, the standard of living declined for both working-class whites and working-class BIPOCs. College graduates couldn't find those scarce professional class jobs as they were becoming computerized and couldn't pay off those debts since they couldn't find jobs. All in the while, it was perceived that Barack Obama had saved the economy as the rich got richer. Remember Occupy Wall Street? We raised the alarm about this, and most of you did not listen. Then 2016 happened. Donald Trump happened. He ran on a campaign saying he was going to drain the swamp and make America great again. What did he mean by that? He was alluding to that period between the 1950s and 1980s when there were still industrial manufacturing jobs. He ran on a campaign to reindustrialize the United States by using the old real estate trick of stoking the anxieties of economically anxious whites who were feeling the crunch of neoliberalism, by blaming immigration and blaming socialism, contrary to the capitalist vision, and let me say that again, the capitalist vision of Hillary Clinton, who wanted to continue the patch-up policies of Barack Obama without actually fixing anything. Trump got elected. He renamed NAFTA, almost started World War III by bombing Iran, imposed a few tariffs here and there, and that's about that. Oh yeah, and he used Twitter to troll people. There you go. Over the past 4 years, lots of terms were thrown around. Nazi, racist, sexist, white privilege, homophobe, fascist, identity wedge issues were put front and center as opposed to economic issues. Our public infrastructure, social safety nets, and commons are either entirely decimated or privatized. Food stamps have been cut, unemployment insurance is means tested, public assistance is virtually non-existent, public transit is in rapid decay, and our roads are crumbling. And socialism is the boogeyman used by these libertarian think tanks like Cato and the John Birch Society to justify these toxic and rotten policies of austerity. The cost of living inches further and further up. BIPOC persons are being murdered by the police. Absent of impunity, cities get destroyed as a result of Jim Crow policing. Immigrants are dealt with harshly. Kids are thrown into cages. Then a pandemic comes along. 350,000 people die because healthcare is privatized and unaffordable. Job scarcity becomes even more scarce because of social distancing and lockdowns. And this was mostly encouraged by condescending professional class liberals. Accept responsibility since you don't accept responsibility for anything else. further stoking the economic anxiety of alienated whites now growing rabidly fascist because nobody wants to take the time to talk to them and explain what is what because they are so high and mighty compared to these misguided deplorables who don't acknowledge their white privilege and who believe Donald Trump was their savior, but was such a savior who hasn't delivered shit. And like a false shepherd, he misleads his brood of sheep away from the source of their problems and the source of problems for bio-POCs and everybody else. And that source of the problem is neoliberalism. Will these problems go away with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? No. They're going to use the same exact patchwork with a slightly more racially and sexually inclusive look implemented by the Obama administration using duct tape to fix a collapsing system while claiming how progressive they are. More free trade deals are going to be signed, life will become more expensive for the working class, and they, like BLM in 2020, and like what happened at the Capitol yesterday, will be pushed to the point of violence directed towards one another and directed toward the police who uphold the laws of a neoliberal state. The future of this country is not looking too bright, contrary to what the professional class believes. Is there a way out of this mess? Yes. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We have to end privatization, end the wars, end the austerity, and put an end to neoliberalism. We have to reindustrialize. We have to rebuild our factories and centers of manufacturing with green technology. We have to reinvest in our country and stop investing in private solutions that siphon wealth away from the public. We spend $2 billion a day on the Pentagon, but we can't do that for our hospitals, our roads, our schools, our public transit. We can't do that. Thought we were the best country in the world, but we can't do that. We need to stop focusing on our differences and stop blaming each other for what neoliberalism is doing and has done to all of us. Because if we don't, we will be plunged into a state of civil war against each other, which the oligarchy wants, instead of a state of revolution together against neoliberalism, which the oligarchy would rather not want to happen. We are at a crossroads here, where we can either hang together or hang separately. But the fact of the matter is simple. We have to put an end to neoliberalism. If we and our children are going to live lives that are better than the lives of our parents, there is no other way. Thank you.